What if I told you that the person you've fallen in love with doesn't actually exist? Not in the way you think, not in the way your heart insists. Because love, especially the kind that haunts you, consumes you, tears you apart, is rarely about the other. It's a mirror. And sometimes, it's a mask. Carl Jung once said, "We don't fall in love with others. We fall in love with our own potential reflected back at us." But most people never pause long enough to realize what that means, because if they did, they'd have to face something far more terrifying than heartbreak. They'd have to face themselves. You see, we don't just fall in love with someone. We fall into a trap of our own unconscious design. We chase the high of connection, but beneath it lurks projection. The shadow we've never confronted, the wounds we've never healed. She becomes your salvation. He becomes your purpose. But what if they were only ever filling a void carved out by your own forgotten pain? Jung warned us, what we do not make conscious will rule our lives. And nowhere is this more painfully obvious than in love. Because that intense pull you feel, the obsession, the longing, the ache when they're gone, is rarely about them. It's your inner child screaming for the parent they never had. It's your shadow finally seeing itself reflected in another human being and calling it soulmate. But soulmates don't come to complete you. They come to shatter you. Romantic love, in its rawest form, isn't a fairy tale. It's a spiritual test disguised as ecstasy. A confrontation with everything you've hidden from yourself. Everything you've denied, buried, feared. And unless you learn to see it for what it is, you'll keep confusing infatuation with destiny. You'll keep mistaking trauma bonds for deep connections. You'll keep bleeding into others, begging them to heal what only you can face alone. This is Jung's chilling truth. Love isn't about finding the right person. It's about becoming conscious enough to see why you're drawn to the wrong ones, and in that realization, brutal as it may be, lies your greatest freedom. This is not a video about how to get love. This is a video about how to see love for what it truly is, and finally wake up. Welcome to Psychra. The moment you say "I love you," you rarely speak to the other. You speak to the image they've awakened in you. You speak to a reflection, not a reality. And that reflection is a piece of your own psyche, long buried, now brought to life by desire. Carl Jung called this the anima and animus, the unconscious feminine within every man and the unconscious masculine within every woman. These aren't just archetypes. They're psychic projections, the blueprint of our deepest longings and fears. And they act like magnets, not drawing us to people who are good for us, but to those who complete the unfinished symphony playing inside our unconscious mind. You meet her. She's beautiful, mysterious, distant, kind. But what you feel is far greater than what she is. You don't just see a woman. You see salvation. You see softness. You see redemption from the cold, hard world. Why? Because something in you was once abandoned. Something in you still aches for motherly tenderness, emotional safety, and unconditional warmth. And without knowing it, your psyche attaches all of that longing to her. You project the lost feminine onto her body. The result? She becomes myth, not a woman, but a goddess. Not a person, but a dream. And dreams, as Jung knew well, are not real. This is how love becomes delusion. And worse, this projection is unconscious, which means you don't know you're doing it. You're convinced your love is pure, that the connection is rare, that fate has brought you together. But in reality, the other person has become a screen upon which you cast your soul's shadows and needs. They didn't choose that role. You assigned it. And now you're addicted to your own illusion. This is why love becomes unbearable. Not because they leave, but because they stop fulfilling the image. The spell breaks, the projection collapses, and you're forced to confront the terrifying truth. You never really knew them. You only ever saw yourself in them. You called it passion, but it was possession. You called it love, but it was a need, cloaked in romance. And here is where suffering begins, because once the illusion shatters, the pain surfaces. The rejection feels cosmic, existential, but it's not about them. It's the wound underneath, the unresolved attachment trauma, the inner child's unmet need, the unconscious guilt and shame you never healed. In this way, romantic love becomes the stage for your deepest wounds to reenact themselves. And until you recognize this, you'll keep calling dysfunction destiny. You'll keep asking, why do I fall for people who hurt me? Why do I chase those who don't want me? Why do I feel abandoned the moment they pull away? But the better question is, what part of me is trying to complete itself through the other? Because love, when unconscious, is not about union. It is about completion. It's about trying to fill a psychological void with another person's presence. Jung warned us that the only way out of this cycle is through awareness, to see the projection, to own it, and to begin the inner work of integration, pulling those unconscious pieces back from the other and reclaiming them as your own. It's a painful process, because it feels like loss, but it is not the loss of love. It is the loss of illusion, and in its place, something stronger can be born. A love rooted not in fantasy, but in conscious presence, not in need, but in wholeness. That is rare, that is sacred, that is real. But first, the mask must fall, and the truth must be seen. You weren't in love with them. You were in love with the version of you that came alive in their presence. That version was always yours. It just needed a mirror. And now, the mirror has cracked. What if the people you loved most deeply were never meant to save you, but to expose you? We often believe that love should heal, that it should soothe, uplift, redeem. But more often than not, the ones we love bring our pain into sharper focus. They don't rescue us from our wounds. They illuminate them. This isn't a mistake. It's the shadow, at work in silence. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self is one of the most uncomfortable truths in psychology. He believed that every human being carries within them a dark counterpart, the part of ourselves we reject, deny, and bury. This isn't just rage, jealousy, or lust. It's every quality we were told as children was unacceptable. Every impulse we pushed down to be loved. And when we fall in love, we often fall for the person who holds our shadow. They embody what we secretly crave, fear, or despise within ourselves. She's emotionally unavailable, just like your father. He's manipulative, just like the part of you you've tried to suppress. She's chaotic, echoing the inner turmoil you pretend doesn't exist. But you don't see this consciously. You only feel the pull, magnetic, irresistible, often destructive. This is why love can feel like a return to something ancient, something buried. Because it is. You're not falling in love with a stranger. You're returning to a childhood pattern. You're reenacting an emotional wound that never healed and calling it chemistry. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. What begins as infatuation soon becomes obsession. What feels like safety morphs into anxiety. The one you thought would heal you begins to hurt you, but you can't walk away, not because you're weak, but because your unconscious mind is clinging to a chance at resolution. You believe on some hidden level that this time, if you just love hard enough, the wound will close. That the parent who never gave you approval will somehow appear in the eyes of this lover. That the shadow, if embraced by another, will finally dissolve. But that is the ego's illusion, and the ego will cling to suffering as long as it believes it's leading you to salvation. This is why some of the most intense relationships in your life are also the most toxic. They are mirrors, not just of your soul, but of your wounds, of your unhealed patterns, of the unconscious shadow you've tried to run from. And so you confuse intensity with intimacy. You mistake trauma for truth. You convince yourself that the pain is a sign of something real, when in fact, it's a sign that your unconscious is begging to be made conscious. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many times have you said, "It just didn't work out, we weren't compatible"? How many times have you ignored the red flags because the connection felt too real to question? But what if the connection was real? Not because it was right, but because it was familiar, because it matched the frequency of your wound. This is the deepest danger of love in the unconscious. You will be drawn to those who mirror your pain. Until you've faced it. You will be loyal to your own suffering, until you finally recognize it as such. Only then does the pattern break. Only then can love begin to transform, from a mirror of your wounds to a mirror of your growth. Real love doesn't come to complete you. It comes after you have completed yourself. And until then, the love you find will serve one purpose: to show you what still needs healing. So the next time someone leaves you shattered, ask not, "Why did they hurt me?" Ask instead, "What part of me chose them? And what part of me did they awaken that I've been too afraid to face?" That question, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of individuation. It is the first crack in the illusion. It is how the false self begins to die and the true self begins to emerge. Because the truth is, you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And love, when seen through the eyes of consciousness, becomes less about what you get and more about what you are forced to remember. That you are still unfinished, that you are still holding pain, and that the universe, in its brutal kindness, will keep sending you mirrors until you finally look. Have you ever fallen so deeply in love with someone that it felt like fate? Like you'd known them in another lifetime? Like the universe had finally answered a question you didn't even know you were asking? And then, months or years later, watched it all dissolve into pain, confusion, and betrayal. If so, I want you to pause here and ask yourself something. Was it love you were feeling? Or was it projection? You see, the ego is clever. It doesn't just protect you with fear and control. It seduces you with fantasy. When you meet someone new, your unconscious begins to search for pieces of yourself in them. Your desires, your fears, your unmet needs. This is what Jung called the anima and animus, the inner woman in man and the inner man in woman. We don't fall in love with a person. We fall in love with our lost half, our repressed side, reflected in someone else. It's a mirror game, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That intoxicating glow you feel in the beginning, that's your own soul, projected outward. And the tragedy is, we don't recognize it. We chase them, never realizing we're really chasing ourselves. This is why the most passionate love often ends in pain. Because when the illusion shatters, you don't just lose the other person. You lose the version of you you thought they completed. And in that moment of collapse, you're given a choice. Do you fall deeper into resentment, bitterness, blame? Or do you look inward and ask the terrifying question, what part of me created this illusion? Most won't. Most will run. Because facing the truth means confronting your own blindness. But if you're still here, if you're listening to this, then you're not most people. You're someone who's willing to look at the shadow. And that's rare. So let me ask you something personal. Have you ever felt like you keep attracting the same kind of person over and over in different bodies? Have you ever confused chaos for passion, thinking that the emotional roller coaster meant it was real? Have you ever stayed in a relationship, not because it was healthy, but because it made you feel needed, worthy, or less alone? If any of this hits home, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what truth about love did you learn the hard way? Your story might be the exact message someone else needs to wake up. And if you're finding value in this video, if it's hitting something deep, tap the like button. Not just for the algorithm, but because more people need to hear this. You never know whose life one idea might change. Also, if you've ever wanted to explore the darker side of psychology, love, power, and transformation, this is what we do here at Psychra. This channel isn't for the faint of heart. It's for those willing to face themselves and emerge reborn. So if that's you, consider subscribing, because what comes next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about love. We're just getting started. To understand love through Jung's eyes is to understand that most of what we call love isn't love at all. It's a negotiation between wounds. It's not soul recognizing soul. It's trauma recognizing trauma. You attract who reflects your inner world, especially the parts you've exiled. The unloved child, the abandoned partner, the rejected self. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because the deeper your unconscious pain, the more intensely you'll bond with the one who triggers it. We don't fall in love with healing. We fall in love with familiarity. This is why the kind, balanced, emotionally available person might seem boring. But the one who's chaotic, elusive, or emotionally unpredictable, that's the one you feel chemistry with. But this chemistry isn't magic. It's your shadow. You mistake suffering for depth. You confuse emotional spikes with connection. And the very person who mirrors your wound becomes the one you cling to for salvation. This is not love. This is spiritual codependency. And the more unconscious you are of this cycle, the more it repeats. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency of all things to turn into their opposite. The one you once adored becomes the one you resent. The one who made you feel seen becomes the one who makes you feel invisible. The one who completed you becomes the one who breaks you. But here's the paradox. That breaking is sacred. Because love is not here to make you happy. It's here to make you whole. It will confront every illusion you've built to avoid facing yourself. It will strip you of your masks, your roles, your fantasies, your projections. And when everything collapses, it will ask you one thing. Are you ready to meet yourself now? Jung believed that suffering in love wasn't a failure. It was an initiation, a sacred descent into the underworld of the psyche, where you meet the very parts of yourself you've been running from. It's why he said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation is not gentle. It burns, it devours, it humiliates the ego. Because the ego doesn't want transformation, it wants control. It wants guarantees, certainty, reassurance. But love doesn't play by the ego's rules. Love is chaos wrapped in beauty. It's the mirror that doesn't flatter. It doesn't care about your comfort. It cares about your awakening. And sometimes, to awaken, it must break you. So what if the heartbreak, the betrayal, the loss, that thing you swore you'd never recover from, was the exact medicine your soul needed? What if every person you loved was never meant to stay, but only to show? To show you your patterns, to show you your wounds, to show you your false beliefs about worth, intimacy, and power. What if the greatest love story was always meant to be with yourself? That's what Jung was pointing toward. Not romantic fulfillment, but individuation. The integration of the soul. The return to the self. Not the ego's ideal of love, but the soul's necessity for truth. And love, real love, only begins when you stop using another person as a mirror to avoid your own reflection. So, where does that leave us, really? If what we call love is often a complex dance of projection, longing, and shadow. If passion is frequently a battlefield where our deepest wounds meet. If the people we fall for are mirrors reflecting what we've yet to heal in ourselves. Then what does it mean to love truly? Carl Jung didn't offer us a fairy tale. He didn't promise that love would be simple, painless, or free of sacrifice. What he did offer was something far more profound. A map to the hidden terrain of the soul. A guide to the terrifying, beautiful process of individuation. The becoming whole. Real love doesn't begin with another person. It begins with the death of illusions, especially the illusion of what you thought love should be. It begins with the death of who you thought you needed to be and the courage to meet your own self, raw, fractured, imperfect, and waiting. Because until you do this work, until you embrace the parts of you that society, culture, and even your own ego have told you to hide, you will keep searching outside for what can only be found inside. You will look for love in others as a way to fill your own emptiness and call it love, but it will be dependency. You will seek connection to avoid loneliness and call it connection, but it will be self-abandonment. You will call it fate or destiny, but it will be repetition, a cycle of loss, heartbreak, and the silent question, why does this keep happening to me? So, if you've been broken, if you've been betrayed, abandoned, or left behind, know this: you are not alone, and this is not the end. In fact, it is the beginning. Because the breaking open, the shattering of the old story, that is the doorway to transformation. That moment when everything you believed about love crashes down is also the moment when your soul finally has room to breathe. And when you stop searching for the perfect partner and start learning to be your own perfect partner, that is when love, real love, can finally begin. It's not about finding someone to complete you. It's about becoming complete yourself. It's about sitting in your own presence, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about learning to comfort yourself, to witness your own pain, to love your own wounds. This is the most radical act of love there is. It's messy. It's lonely. It's terrifying. Because it requires you to face the parts of yourself you might have spent a lifetime running from. Your fear, your rage, your shame, your longing. But it is also the most freeing. When you begin to love yourself in this deep, uncompromising way, you begin to relate to others differently. You no longer seek to control or possess. You no longer cling out of fear. You no longer expect another person to fix what only you can heal. Instead, you meet others as whole beings. You share without needing. You love without conditions. And that love, quiet, steady, real, anchors you in a way nothing else can. It is not a firework that burns out quickly. It is a flame that warms without burning. It is presence, clarity, and truth. This is Jung's vision of individuation, the sacred union, not between two separate halves seeking completion, but within the one soul, reunited with itself. And yes, this path is rare, because most people will never dare to walk it. They will keep searching for the one, chasing illusions and fantasies while their soul waits silently for them to come home. But you made it this far. You stayed with the discomfort. You looked beyond the surface. You did not flinch from the truth, and that means you are ready. Ready to stop blaming others for your wounds. Ready to stop repeating the patterns that keep you stuck. Ready to face yourself, the whole self, with courage and compassion. So here's my invitation to you. Ask yourself, what would it mean to love without needing? To love without clinging? To love without losing yourself? What would it feel like to be loved not because someone needs you, but simply because you are enough? Feel that question sink in. Let it unsettle your familiar stories about love, because it's in that space of discomfort that transformation begins. If you can hold that tension, if you can stop running from your own reflection, then you are on the path to something sacred. The path to the love that Jung described. Not a love of possession, but a love of liberation. Not a love of fantasy, but a love of truth. And this love, this awakening, it is worth every moment of pain, every tear, every heartbreak, because it leads you home, home to yourself. If this message stirred something inside you, something raw, something real, then don't let it fade quietly. Share this video. Leave a comment below and tell me, what did this awaken in you? What truths are you ready to face? Like this video if it cracked open a new way of seeing love for you. And if you want to walk deeper into this journey, into raw psychology, spiritual transformation, and the hidden depths of the soul, subscribe to Psychra. Together, we'll keep unraveling these truths, one shadow at a time. This is Psychra, where psychology meets spiritual depth. I'll see you in the mirror.